connected. In this episode, we are exploring the striking parallels between Mexico and Egypt, from pyramids to gods to cosmic worldviews. And we're asking whether these similarities are coincidence, convergence, or something deeper. It's a journey into history's most intriguing mirror. Tonight on Newsworthy, two words and two question marks.
I'm Steve, and I've not seen a conspiracy that I don't like.
I'm Jerry, the analytical skeptic of the group that says, show me the proof.
I'm Brett. I'm the mediator between the two elders and usually cast the deciding vote.
We weren't just looking for a house. We wanted our forever home.
That's when we called Ed Lockett, USA Mortgage. He helped us see the bigger picture.
Ed showed us how the right loan could fit our family's future, not just today's needs.
And he made sure every detail was clear, so we felt confident planting roots.
Hi, I'm Ed Locke with USA Mortgage. Let's find the loan that makes your forever home possible. Call me today at 502-680-0953.
That's what happens when Robert Bideau enters the building right there. What does that sound? Where did that come from?
I thought it was something you played from your phone.
Oh, that's so bad. I'm so excited. We have Robert Bideau back with us tonight. For the third time, we are trying to get this episode off the ground. Robert, thank you so very much for joining us yet again here on Newsworthy and having the patience to put up with our dumb butt some days.
That's okay. Thanks for having me. I feel like I'm among old friends, so I appreciate you having me back again.
Dude, you're welcome here any single time you ever want to be on the show. You're welcome.
Absolutely.
In fact, Brett is not here yet again. We may have to look at replacing him pretty soon. So if you got time in your day and you want to join the staff, we can probably fit it in the budget.
Do we know what Brett's doing this week by any chance?
We do. Brett is this week learning how to squish grapes and make wine with his bare feet.
I'll be darned.
Yeah, so that's what he's doing this week, if you can imagine that.
Is he doing that in the United States or is he on a trip to Europe somewhere?
No, he's probably in his bathtub, to be honest.
Full disclosure, every time someone misses, Steve makes up some crazy, outlandish reason.
And I fall for it, of course. I'm so naive sometimes. I don't know.
Well, you should, I'm just saying that because if you do decide to join the staff, then that's what you're going to have to listen to every time you go away and on a 2-week trip to Egypt. How amazing is that?
Yeah, it was, as they say, the trip of a lifetime for sure. I spent 2 weeks in Egypt just last month, so I'm still getting used to being back in the States in my little town in western Nebraska.
So let's give the people a little bit of background on you, Robert. You are you have an amazing Etsy store. And your store makes you have to travel into Mexico and Central America a lot. You also host a show on YouTube, Mexico Unexplained. And you have a book, which I am knee deep in right now, also titled Mexico Unexplained. So tell the folks a little bit about your history and why this trip to Egypt is so eye-opening for you.
Well, you pretty much covered my background and how I started Mexico Unexplained. It was based on those buying trips. And I think I might have mentioned this in your other shows that I was a guest on, where I was traveling to remote parts of Mexico, and I kept on hearing stories and encountering different things. And then I noticed that in the United States, nobody really knew about these legends, creatures, UFO sightings, whatever. So then I decided to bring that to the English speaking audience. And I've always been interested in ancient mysteries, the paranormal, all of that fun stuff that we all enjoy well into our adulthood. And Egypt, of course, is part of that. I mean, ever since I was a little kid, I was fascinated with Egypt. And so I had the opportunity to do this 2 week tour of Egypt, and it was amazing. And I was there in April, just last month. I know your shows are evergreen, but April of 2025. And I was with a group of 14 other people. And part of the time I spent with archaeologists, including the world's number one Egyptologist, Dr. Zahi Hawass, who was the former head of the Department of Antiquities in Egypt. And yeah, so
The
it was a
gatekeeper.
fascinating 2 weeks. And when I was down there, to circle back to the topic of this show, when I was in Egypt, I saw a lot of similarities between Egypt and ancient Mexico. And I did a show, the first show that I did when I came back was I explored 9 similarities. And there are others too, but I went into these 9 similarities. And yeah, so that's the story about my background and what I was up to last month.
So many people who I follow have real concerns about the gatekeeper of the Egyptian lore. How did you find him to be as a person, as someone who guards Egypt and the knowledge that comes out of Egypt? How did you find him to be?
Do you really want an honest answer for that? I mean,
Absolutely.
he was probably one of the rudest people to me I've ever met in my life. He's narcissistic, and everything is all about him. And I hate to say this
Jeez.
publicly, but you know what? You don't treat people the way he treated me. I mean, he was to show up to give a lecture, and was selling books. And I probably shouldn't even tell this story, but anyway, I started, I'm going to finish it.
There you go.
Plus, it's really juicy, right? You're not going to hear this from anybody else. But I guess a
Absolutely.
lot of people have colossal egos who are in Egyptology. They want to have their own big discovery. They all want to be like Howard Carter, who discovered King Tut, which there's some doubt there. As a skeptic, we can go into Howard Carter and King Tut because I came to some conclusions after being in Egypt. But anyway, Zahi Hawass is along this whole long line of these egotistical Egyptologists. And I hate to say it because if you see him on these shows with Josh Gates or whatever, even back to Art Bell, when Art Bell went to Egypt and all this stuff, Zahi Hawass is very personable. He's like dynamic and hey and enthusiastic and everything. But up close and personal, I after his lecture to us, our private group, the 15 of us had a private group lecture with him, and he had books for sale. So I bought my $95 book about the Grand Egyptian Museum, which is the best museum I've ever been to in the entire world. And I went up to get him to sign it, and he reluctantly signed it. I tried to chit chat with him, and then I had somebody try to take my picture with him, standing next to him when he was signed, and he said, "No pictures. I can't stay here." And he just pushed my book aside. He just gave me this big old scowl that I was, imposing on him somehow. And I thought, what the heck is this all about? And then people, after he scurried away, people came up to me and said, boy, Robert, I'm embarrassed for you. I've never seen anybody treat another person like that. And I mean, I was paraphrasing
Wow.
right there what he was saying to me, but it was like he didn't want to have anything to do with me. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know my family. He doesn't know who I'm connected with. If he's interested in having his excavations funded by people, good luck. You know, if you're going to treat people like this, good
Right.
luck. Okay. I admire his
Right.
work. Admire his work, okay, but it starts and it stops there because the way he acted, and also at the Sphinx, we had a private lecture with him too, and he lost it with one of the tour people that I was with, a guy from Australia who didn't understand that he wasn't supposed to take pictures during Dr. Zahiwasa's lecture, even though Dr. Zahiwasa's private photographer was snapping photos the whole time. Hawass lost it and said, Mohammed, and that was the tour guide, and he yelled something in Arabic, and then he said it in English, I guess. I told you no pictures. It distracts me. It distracts me. I don't like taking pictures. But his whole thing about the pictures was if you wanted a picture with him, you had to pay $15 to get a picture with this guy. Like, you know what? It was like um, going down to Tijuana and taking a picture next to a donkey painted like a zebra, you know, and you get your picture for $15 and get to take home a memento from, you know, a souvenir from Tijuana. I mean, I thought it was like extremely tacky, you know?
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm glad he granted us, he was there on the plateau, and because he was there, we got access to the Sphinx enclosure. So I was able to touch the paws of the Great Sphinx, where most tourists,
Wow.
you can't, you're above and you have to look down. The Sphinx's head
Right.
is level with the ground, okay? And then they've dug this enclosure, and you can't go down into the enclosure unless you have special permission. You need like super special permission. So part of this tour was to have Dr. Hawass lecture us between the paws of the Great Sphinx. And then
Oh, that
pictures,
would be amazing.
and then pictures were $15 if you wanted one with him, which I thought was, like I said, it's so cheesy. And you know, this guy should be having $5,000 a plate dinners in New York and San Francisco to raise money for his digs, not this, you know, like I said, tourism in Tijuana, $15 a picture. But, you know,
Well, if you ever go to a Comic Con or anything, you see some of these. I used to be a professional wrestler a long time ago, but you see some of these retired guys, and they're the same way. They don't want to. You have to pay for pictures with them, and I'm like, even Brett, who if he was here, he waited in line 3 hours to take a picture with Hayden Christensen, who played Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars.
Mhm.
And I just can't imagine that. I
How
just
much-
can't.
Do you remember him?
Oh,
telling
it
how
was
much
like
they paid?
$150. I mean, it was actually worth, I guess, that. But for $15, and you know, Graham Hancock had at one point, who I really appreciate and really like, and buy into some of his what's the word I'm looking for? So, theories. He and Zawi had some pretty heated arguments over the past few years.
yeah, and he
just
even
because of-
mentioned him while we were at the Sphinx. He mentioned Hancock and debunked some of the things that he was saying and stuff. Yeah, Zahi was really, he spoke badly. Okay, so now I don't feel so bad by dissing him or telling the truth about what happened to me with regard to him. He was bad mouthing Hancock, also Edgar Casey, and then Trump too, because Trump cut off USAID support for his cultural stuff. And USAID was never set up to fund cultural stuff. I guess Doge came in, Elon Musk, and Doge came in and said, what's USAID funding all of this other nonsense when it was set up to fund this sort of thing specifically, like food programs and things like that? Why is it
Right.
going to this cultural thing and that cultural thing? And so Hawass got some of his funding pulled out from under him by Trump, but the funding wasn't supposed to be used for his pet projects in Egypt. So,
Jeez.
anyway, I mean, it was
So-
weird. When you meet people, they say, and not that I was a fanboy of Dr. Zahi Hawass, but when, they say when you meet your heroes,
Right.
you're in for a surprise. And that was the case in
Yeah.
this case, I was like, oh, wow. Because like I said, his persona, which if you look up that word, it's very appropriate here. The persona of Hawass is, very gregarious and nice and outgoing and everything. And in real life, he's not like that at all.
I have went out of my way in the past to not meet celebrities for that very reason. I
It often
just,
happens.
on half of me kind of understands. Hey, they're just trying to have a life. You see these videos of Hollywood stars and they're trying to eat dinner, and there's people bugging them while they're trying to eat dinner, and they get a heat. It's got to be taxed. At the same time, that is how you make your money. That is how you are who you are. That is how, I don't know, it's a fine line to go. So let's talk about similarities between Mexico, ancient Mexico, and ancient Egypt. And Jerry, I have made this comparison on numerous occasions, especially when it comes to things like the pyramids. How two huge, amazing civilizations can come up with the same type of architecture, having never interacted, having never been, cross-mingled, and there's so many similarities. This episode has got me stoked. So let's get into it, Robert. What when you were in Egypt and you were looking around, having been an expert of Mexico, the Mayan and the Aztecs, and what was the one thing that you were like, holy crap? You were like, look at this.
Well, there were quite a few things, but of course, number one on the list is, like you were saying, the pyramids, right? Pyramids in Egypt, pyramids in Mexico. But it's not that simple, though. They're separated by geography and also by time. Okay, so the Great Pyramid was built 4,600 years ago, and then the pyramids in Mexico, they started to build them about 2,000 years ago. There are some older ones than that, but not going back to the time of Khufu and what we see on the Giza Plateau. So the oldest pyramid in Egypt at Saqqara, and I have a show and tell, the book here. This pyramid,
Ooh.
the step pyramid of Saqqara, that reminded me of Teotihuacan. It looked very similar to the Pyramid of the Moon and the Pyramid of the Sun at Teotihuacan, where I used to do tours myself 22 years ago. I took people down there, and that was one of the places that I went to in connection with my import store. So I saw that, and those were very similar. And the Saqqara Pyramid, too, has a plaza in front of it and an enclosure. And it was very reminiscent of Teotihuacan, but they're separated by distance and by a lot of time. And um, one thing that people ask is, how did one culture do pyramids and then the other one do pyramids too? Well, if you look at the pyramids in Egypt versus the pyramids in Mexico, they're radically different, except for the similarity that I just showed you. The pyramids in Mexico vary amongst themselves to a great degree. And then if you compare it to Egypt, there's even, more variation. So when you're an ancient builder, how do you get height? You get height by building up, broad to narrow, right? Because you don't have cranes, you don't have anything to help you with the construction that would, like we have now to make skyscrapers. So that's a common way to build up, right? And then both cultures had an idea of sacred mountains. So they're emulating mountains too. There are a lot of mountains or small hills around that part of Egypt that look like pyramids. Okay. And a lot of times we were on the road and we were mistaking mountains or small hills for man-made structures, and they weren't. So, anyway, yeah, you have pyramids, but they have different functions. In Egypt, they were tombs, and people say, no, they're not, whatever. We can circle back to that. In Egypt, they were tombs, and in ancient Mexico, they were used for ceremonies mostly, religious and civic ceremonies, sacrifices, rituals, things like that. And in Egypt, they were tombs. And people say there were power generators, for Egypt. Even there was a major politician in the US who said that they were granaries, I think. And,
Yeah.
or that their usage was mysterious. But
The politician got the granaries thing from World Civ. What was the name of it? Civilization 3. That's what if you
Really?
oh, really?
if you create the Egyptian pyramids as a feat,
Right.
it counts as a granary in all of your cities. Jerry knows what I'm talking about. He's a gamer. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you out, Robert.
No, that's fine. Now I understand where that came from. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So, they were tombs, all right? And I was able to go into the Great Pyramid. I went inside it, and our little group, they opened up. There are 3 chambers. There's the subterranean Queen's Chamber, there's the King's Chamber, and there's another chamber. The King's Chamber is open to tourists sometimes. I went into that, and there was the sarcophagus of Khufu there. Now, some people argue which king it was for or whatever, and there's a lot of controversy about that. But were they tombs or were they something else? I would safely say that they were tombs. And a couple of things that struck me, the Great Pyramid is smaller than I thought it would be up close. And what I saw on that plateau were a lot of mistakes that finally led to the perfection of the Great Pyramid. The step pyramid of Saqqara, from this right here, the step pyramid of Saqqara was a mistake. There's also the bent pyramid where the angle was too sharp and then they had to, come make it go together and at a less steep slope. There were a lot of mistakes there. They kept on getting bigger. They kept perfecting it until they got to the Great Pyramid. And that was the biggest and the best. And then after that, there were a couple of pyramids that were, less magnificent than that. And then they stopped building them. And why they stopped building them? I'm sure it's just like the problems that we have in the modern world with grand infrastructure plans. Take the train in California, the bullet train that's billions of dollars under budget, and there's like 10 miles of track that are built or something like that. And then people get fed up with these big building projects and then they just stop, you know. So I think that's what happened with the pyramids. And they said it took like 27 years to build that. I can see that. I can see it. We don't know how they were built. We don't know how they were built. The plans are not there. The Masons, you know, Freemasonry goes back to these pyramid times, and the Freemasons were very secretive with how they did things, and they apparently didn't leave behind any blueprints. So we're left to guess, and people who haven't been there or haven't studied it, they're inclined to fill in the blanks with, you know, the usual suspects, aliens, you know, levitation technology, all of this stuff. But I
I'm
think it
actually in
was
both of those camps.
I think it was doable just by mechanical means that they had, but we just don't know how they did it. They're obviously there. I mean, so I don't know where to go from there, but yeah, it was a trip. I went, okay, to be more esoteric, I'll give everybody a bone here who are in the hardcore paranormal camp. When I was in the central main chamber of the Great Pyramid, I did feel something there. Okay. I felt something. If you can activate your pineal gland, I can. Okay. It was strong in there. And I don't know if, you know, there could be explanations for that. Getting in there was pretty damn grueling, you know? I mean, I think I
Hmm.
walked up like 4 flights of stairs and it was crouching and you had to bend and go down and walk around. And I mean, it was, you know, I'm almost 60, okay? And it was tough. Although one of the guides said there was an 88-year-old woman who made it through there. And yeah, she got into, you know, she had special permission with the group and she, you know, this woman who was almost 90 got to go in there and she was able to do that. And then the tour guide made a joke and said, you know, her name was Edith or something. You know, Edith, maybe you can tell us how these pyramids were built because you must have been around at that time. No,
Man, I was just getting ready to use that on Jerry.
You
no,
often
but
do.
you know, it was fascinating to go in there and yeah, I so
Gosh,
yeah,
I
I
have
was
so many questions, but I don't want to
go
take up the
ahead,
whole
go
show
ahead.
about the
I guess we
pyramids.
have time. No, the show's
Because,
whatever
well,
you
the,
want to be
the
about it. Yeah. So ask
here's the
away.
thing. Jerry and I even have, on multiple occasions, looked at some of these stones. We've listened, or I've listened, to current owners of stone quarries in the United States, and some of the base stones on the Great Pyramid, as an example. They said that they are just now getting to the technology with the trucks and the hydraulics to be able to move some of these stones that were used at the base of the pyramid. Obviously, the stones get a little smaller as they go up, but some of the base stones and their astronomical weight, I've always had a hard time believing, and maybe it's just that, you know, I heard it said the other day that that humans today think that the earlier, the further back you go, the simpler the people were, and that we don't give them enough credit for their ingenuity, for their thought, how they make things work. But this guy in particular, he runs a quarry in Utah or midwestern state. I don't remember exactly, but he said moving a 60-ton stone requires basically an act of Congress. And some of these stones at the base are what, 200 ton, give or
I'm
take.
not sure about the weight, but a lot of those base stones were quarried right from right there. I mean, yards
Oh
away
wow!
from where they, You know, some people say that most of those stones from the pyramids were floated down the Nile and came from quarries from far away. But no, you can see where the stones were cut right there. They
Oh
dismantled
wow.
parts of, yeah. So part of that plateau was actually used as a quarry. So some of those
So
bigger stones, it wouldn't have taken much. Well, I guess it, it's not like saying they had to move them 100 miles to get there. They had
gotcha.
to move them a
So
100 feet, maybe, on the bigger
you
stone.
said that you got to touch the Sphinx's paw.
Yeah.
What is your thought about the thoughts and the rumor, not rumors, that's a bad word. The theories that the Sphinx, that the Egyptians probably did the head of the Sphinx, but because the head is so much smaller than the rest of the body, that they think that that was taken from, that was probably something else, either a lion or a dog head that broke, or
They
the Egyptians made
repurposed
it
they
what it is.
repurposed the head. They
Right.
repurposed that. Yeah, I've heard that too. And when I went there to the Sphinx, I thought the body was going to be a lot bigger than the head. But once you're up close to it, it does look, I mean, it's strange because you look at drone footage and it looks like way out of whack. But once you're down
Right.
there, it looks proportional when you're up close to it. It's weird.
Oh wow.
And yeah, so there are theories, and Dr. Zahi Hawass, while we were there in the Sphinx enclosure, he talked about some of the theories about the Sphinx being a lot older. Graham Hancock said something about erosion, that
Right.
it showed
Water
that the
erosion.
Sphinx was like 15,000 years old or something, and I don't know. But Dr. Zahi Hawass explained what all that meant, and that's been explained for a while. So I'm not inclined to believe, seeing this is why people don't like me, I think sometimes, is because I blow the mystery out of the water and I look at things very skeptically. And I think, I don't think it's that old. And some of it's been refurbished, and they know that, the Romans added bricks to the paws and stuff like that. And so, you know, I don't know. There's been a lot of stuff that's been redone on that sculpture, but I
Well,
think,
anything that has been around for 5,000 years is going to have some touch up work. I
right.
mean, Jerry probably has some filler, I'm sure.
Just a little bit.
Jerry is also very much a skeptic. So don't feel bad, Robert, being here and being a skeptic, because that's what Jerry gets paid to do.
But a skeptic of what? I'm not a
Everything.
skeptic of the Sphinx. I'm not a skeptic of pyramids. So I
Well,
don't
you
know why
look at it
you
with a critical
brought that
eye
up in
like you
context to it.
should. Yeah, yeah. So,
Absolutely. Unlike Mr.
and
I
he was,
believe all conspiracy theories.
and
Go ahead.
when we were in the Sphinx enclosure, he was talking about the rumors of secret tunnels, and he poo-pooed that. He said that there aren't any. I don't know. But back to what you were saying about gatekeepers, I think he was acting as a gatekeeper for many years. Like, he would not reveal the DNA of the mummies, like, because I think they were concerned about race, and they were concerned about the conclusions that people would make, that the pharaohs of Egypt were really Caucasian. Okay. And
Really?
and what that would mean, yeah, that they were related mostly to people who were Turkish or Syrian in ancient times, which were more Caucasian than they are now, more like Persians. Okay. So
Interesting.
Right.
yeah, there is a, when it comes to the DNA of the mummies, the ethnicity and stuff like that, that's very touchy, because there's this whole out of Africa theory, and then there are activists who believe that Egypt was really a black civilization and stuff like that. And there are people who believe that ancient Mexico was a black civilization too. So people can believe what they want, and the internet gives you a wonderful forum to spout whatever you want to say. So I don't know.
That it does. So, what other similarities really stuck out to you between Mexico and Egypt?
Well, the writing system of the Maya and the writing system of the Egyptians, they don't have a pure alphabet, and they have pictographic and logogram syllables or symbols in their writings, meaning that sometimes the symbol stands for a whole word or sometimes a sound, and then that's combined with alphabetic symbols that are just sounds. You know, it's kind of like in our language, we do a combination of that. If you read a book, it's straight alphabet. But if you go online, you can see somebody or a text, but people will combine emojis, you're full of, and then they'll put the picture of the poop or whatever. And then people will say, I hate you, spelled H with an 8, TE, you know, I hate you. So the 8 in there becomes a symbol of a sound, and that's not really, the 8 is a number, you know. So we have that kind of colorful way of writing where we combine text and symbols, but it's not in our formal literature. And the way that the Egyptians used symbols in alphabetic form, in logograms and pictograms, the Maya did the exact same thing. It's the way that these scripts look are completely different, but how they use them was identical. Okay. And it's the way that we use,
Very
like I said, in internet and text. It's what we do now. I think maybe the human brain defaults to that kind of communication. You know, if you see an image and, you know, you are full of, and then you have that image, people instinctively know when they see what it is, you know. So combining visual cues with alphabet and the way they did it, it's identical. It's very interesting.
That it is.
Yeah. So
that is crazy. And there was, both of these civilizations have various representations of many gods. Is that accurate?
yeah. And there's some similarities, like there's the sun god Amun Ra in Egypt and Huitzilopochtli in Mesoamerica, the Aztecs specifically, later Mesoamerica. And there are a lot of similarities between those two gods. But you can say that's archetypal too, you know, because the sun is the giver of all life, you know. And so that's going to be the supreme god in most cultures, you would think. It's either the sun or the earth,
Right.
you know, and that's just humans. That's how we are. But curiously, too, there is Anubis, the jackal-headed, you know, canine god in ancient Egypt, and then Xolotl, which is an Aztec dog god. And I have here, we'll do show and tell again. This is a canopic jar. And do you know what a canopic jar is?
No.
It's
I have no idea.
when they mummified Egyptians, they would put their organs in 6 jars that look like this. This has the head of Anubis on it, the jackal-headed god. So this canopic jar, you know, it's made to look like Anubis. And most canopic jars, they have this sort of symbolic stuff. The canopic jars of King Tut, they have faces on them, and the faces look like Michael Jackson. You can look that up. You can look up Canopic Jar, King Tut, and then you'll see Michael Jackson. That's what came to my mind. But anyway, so the dog god Anubis was the god of death and embalming. And he also guided you to the underworld, okay, in ancient Egypt. Now, Sholot was the god that, well, it was a spirit in the form of a dog. Sometimes it was a man's body with a dog's head, just like Anubis, but not very common. There are some depictions of him, of Xolotl, like that, like a dog man. And I know everybody in the paranormal community, they love the dog man, right?
Oh
So
yeah.
the
Just a couple of weeks, we're going to be at a Bigfoot festival. We will be talking all about Dogman there, I'm sure.
right. So Xolotl was a little hairless dog, a Xoloitzcuintle dog, that guided you once you died. He took you and guided you down to the underworld, so you had safe passage. Very similar to Anubis. Now you could say, gosh, that's really strikingly similar. How, separated by geography, by time. How is that possible? Well, once again, we have archetypes or semi archetypes, I guess. The dog is man's best friend, right? So that's in a lot of cultures, except what was it in the debates, the presidential debates in 2020, or well, the last one, 2024. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so some cultures eat dogs, but most cultures, I think, look to the dog as a friend, right? So the friend is going to help you when you die. Isn't that a nice thought? Isn't that a nice thought,
It
having
is,
your dog
but
help you? And so, your dog helps you during life, even in a primitive culture. He helps you hunt and whatever. He acts as an alarm, if there's danger coming into your camp. And then, you could be living on Fifth Avenue and you're pampering your little Pekingese or whatever. So your dog is your friend wherever you are. And it makes sense that
or he's
in
trying to ruin your podcast.
right, I forgot
There's
that.
that possibility.
That's a good one.
Just throwing it out there.
That's a good one.
So I get that, but I got to push back a little bit because
Okay.
and I agree. If I'm going to be carried off into the afterworld, I want my best friend from whenever, in my case, it'd be my Harold Gene to take me that way. But that's even, let me digress. Even if that is the way that the thought process came along, that is almost as far a leap as saying that at some point, something or someone connected these two civilizations and taught them. I mean, for them to I guess I'm trying to get my thoughts together because I don't want to sound like an idiot.
I think you're wrong from the sense of what if it was simply a truth, a reality that they
Sure.
both discovered.
Could be.
Doesn't mean some extraterrestrial had to come and say,
I'm not saying it was extraterrestrial.
you said someone had to come and,
I'm just saying that it's 50 degrees one way, 50 degrees the other. Meaning that it's just as likely that there was a connection of some sort between the two civilizations as it is that both civilizations developed very similarly over the same, even though they're on separate sides of the world. That's all I'm saying. There's nothing that would convince me that they just developed this way as opposed to there was some connection for them to develop this way. We're only covering non-similarities today, and like Robert said, there's a plethora of other similarities between these two great civilizations. That's all I'm saying. It
well,
makes as much sense in my brain that there was a connection, that as opposed to them just developing naturally the same way, with the same type of gods, with the same type of architecture, with the same type of writing, with the same type of one thing that we haven't even talked about yet, their fascination and their love of gold, which in the type of architecture that they use has been proven that that can actually be a conduit for electricity. That's all I'm getting at. I'm just saying there's a lot of similarities for there to have been developed independently of each other with no contact and no common denominator whatsoever, other than length of time that they were existing. Does that make sense? That was a really long way of getting there. I apologize.
and you might have seen me want to pounce on that for
Please do.
No,
Please do.
I will be the devil's advocate to the devil's advocate, okay?
There you go.
So you were saying they. Okay, who is they? Well, in this case, with the dog leading you to the underworld, the hairless dog, the Xolotl, that's the Aztecs. The other civilizations in Mesoamerica didn't have that. So what does that mean? So it was only in that civilization, okay? So the others didn't have this hairless dog that guided people down, all right?
Gotcha.
Egypt had something similar, but we're comparing the ancient Egyptians to the Aztecs. We're not comparing them to the Olmecs or to the Toltecs, which were other civilizations in Mexico. So
Gotcha.
it's really just one. The Yaquis didn't have it. The Tarahumaras didn't have something like that. So, it's one culture there.
Well,
And maybe
I
their
just wanna say
predecessors and
that
associated cultures. No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
as someone who is uninformed and not educated as much as one should be, I, like a lot of people, group all of, and I've been there. I've climbed the Uxmal ruins in Progreso. If you ever get the opportunity, my gosh, what an amazing thing that is. But we tend, when we're not studying it, we tend to group all of South American civilizations together, all Egyptian civilizations together, and that's just one. So, like, for most people, the Mayans, the Aztecs, and the other two that you mentioned there, that's just them. It's one
Yeah,
civilization.
And they're radically different. You look at ancient Egypt
Right.
and you have this trajectory that's really uninterrupted for thousands of years. I mean, some dynasties fell and there were, like some periods of chaos or whatever, but the culture, the gods, everything pretty much it was unchanged for 4,000 years until really the Romans and the Greeks and then the Romans came, and then there were some changes, and then Christianity, put the nail in the coffin to the old religion. But in Mesoamerica, like how I was saying that the Egyptian writing system was similar to the Maya writing system. Well, the Aztecs didn't have the same writing system as the Maya. It was a very crude form of writing. And it was mostly for accounting, for tribute, taxation, stuff like that. It wasn't as colorful and as in-depth as the Maya. The Maya, could write poetry with the alphabet and the writing system they had. But the other cultures in Mesoamerica, the Olmecs didn't have a writing system. Teotihuacan, they're saying they had a proto-alphabet, a writing system. The Maya really were the ones that had the massive depth of glyphs and, the meaning to the writing. So I'm comparing the Maya to the ancient Egyptians. And in the thing with the dog, I'm comparing the Aztecs to the ancient Egyptians. The pyramids are pretty much everywhere in Mexico, so that applies to every culture. And they also
Question,
had the
but
same use. No, go ahead.
right. But as you mentioned about the pyramids themselves, there's a ton of differences in the pyramids of the two countries, from the
Yeah,
material to the purpose to their use.
yeah.
Even within the pyramids, there's a ton of differences.
Right. And the pyramids in Mexico, there's no mystery as to how they were made. The bricks are really
Right,
small. I mean, they're not like massive blocks. And a lot of the
right,
pyramids, the Great Pyramid of Cholula, which is considered Toltec around that Toltec time period. Some people consider Cholula its own culture, but the Great Pyramid of Cholula is the largest pyramid in the world by volume. It's bigger than the Great Pyramid, but it has successive layers on it, and it's, huge volume. And when the Spanish arrived, they thought it was just a big hill, and they put a church on top of it. They knew that the natives there were they thought it was a sacred mountain, and the natives, it was 1,000 years removed from its heyday. Okay, and so there was stuff growing on it, and people knew that there was something special about this place. They didn't know exactly why. And then the Spanish saw that it was a sacred place, so they put a church on top of it, and it's still there. So, yeah, but even that massive pyramid, we know how that was made because it didn't take, any special, unique feats of engineering. It took a lot of labor and all of
the
that stuff. No, I'm not diminishing it at all, but it was completely doable. Yeah.
I remember how climbing up, and I got to go. I think it was the last year they actually allowed people on that pyramid, and I got to climb up it, and my wife and my kids got to climb up it. And going up it was fine. Coming down it was a whole different ballgame because the steps on the pyramid were 4 to 6 inches. It wasn't even a whole American foot.
Oh,
So
well, I
coming
thought the
down it,
pyramids were built by giants. I thought the pyramids were
oh,
built by giants. How
not
could that
those.
be?
I mean, not those, because coming down it, you had to turn around backwards and use all fours to come down safely. It was
Yeah.
that steep, that narrow in between the steps, and it was an amazing. I will never forget my time there. And they were talking about how at that particular site that there was 2 times a year, and I believe it was the summer and the winter solstice, that it would line up perfectly with particular sun things. And if you were to simply take a whistle and blow against the pyramid, it would let out this, what they considered a godly sound. And it was so bizarre how accurate that the acoustics were on these giant structures. Amazing.
Yeah,
I was blown away.
there's several sites in Mexico where you can do that sort of thing. You can clap or do a whistle, and then excuse me, things are astronomically aligned. It's, what they call sacred geometry. You hear that being
Yes,
tossed
that.
around a lot. And the pyramid of Chichen Itza, on the spring and autumnal equinoxes, you can see a shadow of a snake on the staircase. And
That's what I was talking about. Sorry.
yeah. And yeah, that's a special pyramid. That's the pyramid that I use as my logo. And in 1992, I had the opportunity. It seems like I get these special access things all the time. I don't know. Um, I had the opportunity to go inside the staircase. There's a way
Whoa.
to go inside, and you go up the old pyramid that's a layer beneath. Okay, and we were allowed to go up to the top of the older interior pyramid, and there was a jaguar sculpture that was at the top, and that's been long closed off. I don't think they even let tourists climb that pyramid on the outside anymore, but
It's
I was
crazy.
allowed to go inside, and that was a trip.
the grounds at Chichen Itza, which is another set of ruins that I had the privilege of going to. I remember them very specifically saying that they had excavated only like a 5% of it at the time, and it included the Chichen Itza pyramid and maybe 2 or 3 other structures. They said that LIDAR had that within the jungle there was hundreds of acres more structures and grounds that they had planned on excavating.
Yeah, a lot of those sites in Mexico,
It was blown away.
you see the civic ceremonial center of the site, and then smaller temples, and then residential areas. Even some of the homes of the elites are still covered in jungle, or they're still underground, covered by earth, because there's so many ruins and there's no funding for excavations, and so that's the way it is.
The cartels could really garner public opinion by funding those things. They'd probably let them continue doing what they do with unharassed if they would just fund those. Robert, I've got a million questions for you.
Paying off the politicians is a lot easier, believe me. They don't need the goodwill of the world or to show that. Yeah. It's easier to just give 1,000,000 pesos to some local politician for them to turn the other way or whatever.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I do have 1,000,000 questions for you, especially when we're talking. Let's switch back to Egypt for a second.
Sure.
The very latest LIDAR things that supposedly have uncovered huge tunnels and chambers underneath the Great Pyramid and in that general plateau. What's your thoughts on those? Because the information has been presented in a very scientific manner, but you're a person that's actually walked that. Do you think there's more under that we have yet to discover?
I've been in some of the tunnels, actually. I mean, and so, yeah, there's a lot to be discovered. And what Zahi Hawass said to us at the Golden City excavation, he said that about 40% of Egypt's been excavated. There's 60% that's waiting to be discovered. Okay. And some major pharaohs, they haven't found their tombs yet. And some other rulers like Cleopatra and Alexander the Great, their tombs are supposedly in Egypt somewhere, but no one knows where they are. And also King Tut's father, Akhenaten, who some conspiracy theorists, if you want to say that, or pattern recognition specialists,
Jerry,
believe that Akhenaten was cloned to make President Obama. And if the whole birth certificate thing with Obama is really a smokescreen to veer us away, to steer us away from the real truth that Obama is a clone of the Egyptian king Akhenaten. And if you look at some statues
that's deep.
If you look at some statues of Akhenaten, there's a similarity there. It's really funny, actually. And a lot of Akhenaten's monuments have been defaced because he changed the religion in ancient Egypt. He said, we're getting rid of all the gods and we're going to worship one God, the sun god, Amun-Ra. And so after he died, people were, ticked off, and his son Tutankhamun restored the old religion in his short life. He restored the old religion, and a lot of the statues of Akhenaten were destroyed. But if you pull up Akhenaten and you look at Obama, they look a lot alike. But, there's similarities in history for people who, Emperor Vespasian of Rome, if you look up Vespasian and you look up Lyndon Johnson, they look like they're the same person. So I don't know if it's pareidolia, where you're looking for things that you're looking for similarities. Like I said, the canopic jars of King Tut look like Michael Jackson. You pull that up, and there's an Egyptian sculpture actually in a Chicago museum, and anybody listening can Google Michael Jackson Egyptian sculpture Chicago Museum, and there's a sculpture of an Egyptian noblewoman, and it looks like Michael Jackson. It's really funny. But you can see things. There's
I think
one
that
pic- one last thing. There's about the pareidolia. What I took a picture and I put it on my personal Facebook of a queen standing in front of it's a tomb painting of a queen standing in front of one of the Ramses, I think Ramses the Ninth, and she's holding up a black um a black rectangle thing. And it looks like she's trying to take his picture with a cell phone, with an iPhone. It looks exactly like that. But how could that be, right? And what is it? Archaeologists
right.
don't know how to interpret that picture. What's she doing in that picture? It looks like she's trying to get the perfect shot of the king. And I put that in my Facebook. I saw that. I was like, what the heck is this? So I
Well,
don't
you
know.
have those pictures of what they consider time travelers, where you have people who are the lady walking down the street in the 1920s with what looked like she was on a cell phone with an
And that's
iPhone.
so
You had
debunked.
you have people like in the Mike Tyson fight way back when, and I forget which fight it was, that had the iPhone 13. The guy, but those things happen. Jerry has the hardest part. Wherever he goes, people say he looks like Brad Pitt. I don't. A lot of people say that he does.
Vice versa. They say Brad looks like me
Oh,
because I'm older.
yeah, of course, like way old.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? What do you think about the temple? You had told us that you got to go after everybody left. You got to go in at night to the Temple of Luxor all by yourself. How was that?
It was amazing because, these gigantic sculptures and, it's just amazing. The whole place is, yeah, we had special access to go at night and it's lit up. So, yeah, it was a amazing experience because there were only 15 people in my group plus the tour guide and like an assistant or whatever, and we were wandering around these gigantic columns and statues and stuff like that. Yeah, it was pretty breathtaking. And it's interesting that the Temple of Luxor has been a religious site continuously for 4,000 plus years because it was an ancient Egyptian temple. And then when the Christians came, they occupied part of it and made a church inside on the grounds of the temple, inside the temple, taking up about 25% of the old temple. And then what happened? Christianity was replaced by Islam, and Islam kind of overpowered Christianity. 10% of modern day Egypt is Christian still. But then what happened is a mosque was built on top of the church. So 25% of the Temple of Luxor currently is occupied by a mosque. So for thousands of years, that place has been a place of worship continuously without interruption. The gods have changed, the worship has changed, but it's still been a religious place. Probably one of the longest places on earth where you see something like that. But yeah, it was all amazing.
Did you? Weird question, I guess. Did you feel that there? Did you when I imagine I've never been in a place other than some places in Mexico where they have had a cathedral. I've been in several cathedrals in Mexico where they have been there since the 1800s. And when you go into these places, you get a feeling, you get a tingle, your hair stands on end, that there's something there. Did you get that in the Temple of Luxor?
Not really. I mean, you're more awed by the architecture, and that could be a spiritual experience. I mean, you go into the Vatican, everything's so overwhelming. You think like, oh, God must be here, you know? So on that kind of level, yeah, you know, if you need to go to the Vatican, oh my gosh, the the artwork, how intricate everything is,
It's on the bucket
it's
list.
made to impress, you know, God is here, you know. And same with these temples. And there's a lot of ego of the pharaohs too, like Ramses the Great is everywhere. You know, he did this temple and that temple and whatever. So these pharaohs wanted to make their mark and leave their mark for posterity, and they sure as heck did that because we're still looking at this stuff.
Wow. Sweet. Well, let's stop 1 second and let's listen to a pharaoh in our current time, Mr. Ed Locke.
Tax season is here, and that refund check feels like a fresh start.
Exactly. But instead of splurging, imagine using it to pay down debt or even as a down payment on a new home.
That's what we did. We called Ed Locke at USA Mortgage, and he showed us how our refund could open doors we didn't think were even possible.
Ed explained the options clearly, whether it's reducing what you owe or building towards home ownership. He makes the numbers work for you.
Hi, I'm Ed Locke with USA Mortgage. Your tax refund can be more than extra cash. It can be the key to financial freedom or your next home. Let's talk about the best path for you. Call me today at 502-680-0953.
I'm sorry.
Ed is a fantastic individual. If you ever need to move to Kentucky or Florida or Tennessee and you need a loan, Robert, you need to call Ed Locke. He's awesome. Of course, you're pretty much like in Nebraska at this moment, right?
Yeah, and I'm a
Just around the
cash
winter, so
buyer,
that's
so I don't need a loan.
Saying something.
No, just kidding. You didn't
There you
hear
go.
what I just said, did you? What do I need a loan
What's
for?
that?
I'm a cash buyer.
Oh, yeah. You're my favorite kind of buyer. Those are the easy ones. I like those.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions for you to get you started here.
Yeah.
And the first one's going to be kind of out there. And I apologize, but I have to ask because you have touched or seen or been associated with a great number of pyramids on our planet. What do you think about the videos and the thoughts about the Mars pyramid? Have you seen the thoughts about that at all? Have you seen any of the
Yeah,
videos
I
about
even-
that?
Yeah.
And the
I
fact that
even-
it's absolutely huge.
Yeah. I edited a book about that. I didn't get credit for it, but I did help a guy edit a book about that. So the pyramids on Mars, Cydonia, all of that stuff, I'm very familiar with it. And the face on Mars, and yeah. So I don't know. That could be pareidolia again, you know, wanting to see something that's there. And there's been a lot of shifting shadows, and it's a whole lot of speculation, I think, from what I've seen. And, you know, Art Bell famously called the face on Mars a cat box. He thought it looked like a litter box or whatever. I don't know. But I don't know. It's hard to tell. There are a lot of conflicting images coming out of Cydonia, so it's hard to. The guy that I helped edit his book, he was using complicated math and showing sacred geometry and all of this stuff, but his biggest, I don't know, his biggest blind spot was he was almost making this stuff work, making the angles work based on his own outline of the base of this gigantic pyramid. If you look at the photos of the pyramid that's in Cydonia, or the supposed pyramid, it doesn't have clearly delineated edges. So he kind of like twerked the edges and made all these angles work and plotted out this map of all these angles and how they corresponded to the stars or whatever. But I feel like his foundation was based on error because you can't really get
Right.
good measurements of the, outline of the base of that pyramid, if it is a pyramid. So once again,
Yeah.
we
That's
have
the thing.
a mystery, and you can fill in the blanks with whatever you want. That's what people do. So
Right. Well, especially when even we're still what 20 years probably from putting people on the surface of Mars to actually go see. And if it was such a big deal, they would have probably sent one of our 2 rovers over there already to just check it out. That's the
yeah, why haven't
way
they
I look
done
at
that?
it.
Why haven't they done that? I mean,
Right, right.
isn't space and made in a
I
Hollywood
absolutely agree.
basement or whatever? What? There's some songs space is made in a Hollywood basement. I don't know. I'm
Yeah,
getting that
that's
wrong.
Red Hot Chili Peppers, Californication.
Okay. All right.
Space is made in a Hollywood basement. That's
Right. Okay.
Californication.
All right.
Good song. I disagree with that. I do, man. I just gotta say, I absolutely believe we've put men on the Mars or on the moon. I pray that I'm never proven wrong.
You're not going to be.
But there are some pretty compelling arguments even to that. So, anywho, let's
What,
get
that we actually put the man on the moon? I
Yes.
would agree. There's very compelling arguments that we did exactly that.
no that we did.
No, there's not. There really isn't.
So, tell us about time and the calendars that each of the civilizations created, Robert, because those are also very similar.
Right.
In
They
their
they tracked the stars, they tracked time, But if you're going to have any sort of administrative structure in your civilization, you're going to need to do that. You're going to need to, and then in Egypt, they needed to know when the Nile was going to flood, so when they could plant their crops. So they had to have a very tight calendar there. And then in ancient Mexico, they use the calendar also for planting too. So, yeah, in any complex civilization, you're going to have a time consciousness. So the calendars were very similar.
You're absolutely right. I don't think. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
go
that's
ahead.
about it. I mean, there's really not much. I mean, the names of the days were different, and there were more differences than similarities, but there are similarities between the calendars too. But once
Right.
again, we're sharing things here. We're sharing the stars. Everybody can look up and see the same star field. We're sharing the whole notion of seasons, throughout the world. So we're
Right.
going to have similarities in marking time because we have similarities in time itself, so to speak.
Absolutely.
So what
And I
happened
think,
to
like you
Steve?
said
He
earlier,
disappeared.
with
Oh,
any
sorry.
advanced, yeah, I think you had to go check on the dogs again. He'll be back.
Okay.
Hopefully, the dogs don't eat him this time. But yeah, like you were saying, I think that with any advanced civilization, not just Egypt, not just Mexican, but any advanced civilization in the world, they are going to attempt for a wide variety of reasons to be able to quantify time, to be able to track it. There's a million reasons why you would need to do that. And
Mhm.
again, Steve was talking earlier about were a lot of the similarities possibly caused by a connection. He didn't say it. He seemed to be alluding to the fact, and he has mentioned this on other occasions. Was there an extraterrestrial visitor who was able to impart knowledge of this nature to different people from around the world? I think that's what he was really getting at. And my point is, in many cases, I think it was simply people doing very smart, very intellectual people doing research and figuring out how to track these things. I don't think that it by any means requires uh, extraterrestrial influence.
Yeah. I mean,
Bah humbug.
we would
The answer's always
like to, the
alien.
poster, that poster says, I want to believe, and a lot of people do. But I think when you get older and you get deep into the research, some people say, oh, if you do your own research, then you're just reinforcing your own biases. And that's not, do your own research is the wrong thing. If you're just looking at data, I don't think that that's wrong. I mean, you're not reinforcing any bias if you're looking at
Right.
raw data and then you walk away and you come away with your own conclusions. I mean, you can research things without having the conclusions provided for you. And I think,
Sure.
like in my case, I have a lot of experience with certain things, like niche things. And if people were to ask me questions about those things, I know about them pretty instinctively. Like people have asked me, what do you think of these alien artifacts that are being found in Mexico? What do you think of those? Well, I've been importing arts and crafts for 27 years. I'm an expert in Mexican arts and crafts. I can say that. Japanese arts and crafts, I have no idea. I'm completely clueless. Asian arts, whatever. I don't know anything about that. I know Mexican arts and crafts. There's probably not going to be very many other people who know more about them than I do. And I can spot something and I can tell you usually where it's made, how it's made, what it's made from. And I can see these alien artifacts and I can see that all of them, pretty much all of them are fakes. You notice I keep the crack of the door open a little there. Almost all of them.
Right.
Because there could be some that have, dubious origins. But most of what I'm seeing, they're made in workshops. I know how they're aging them. They're aging them with kerosene. That's a trick that a lot of people don't. What? Kerosene? Um, I can look at this stuff and figure it all out because of my background. And other people who don't have that background will fill in the blanks with whatever they want. Okay? So I think that happens with a lot of things in life. You don't know how this building is made. You have a 5th grade education, you don't know how this building's made. You've never studied architecture. Well, it's got to be Tartaria. It's got to be, this super civilization that was here before. No, go to the hall, go to your county courthouse and pull up the plans for the damn building, Don't just jump to conclusions. And I think a lot of people do that. And I'm the Debbie Downer sometimes when I say, oh, I'm sorry, guys. But I do keep the door open for wonder. I don't have all the answers. And I learn from my audience a lot of the times. So I'm not Mr. Know-it-all, Mr. Smarty Pants, but there's some things that you can really know, but there are some things that I don't have answers for, and I don't obsess over trying to figure things out. I'll just put them on a shelf and then, save it for later, because then you go crazy if you keep yourself in the rabbit hole, Look at some Bigfoot researchers, some JFK researchers. There's no getting out from under this stuff.
Sure.
You can just keep doing it for your whole
Yeah, we
life and
deal-
go nowhere.
with you were talking about how you were treated by the Egyptian. We've had similar experiences with some of those folks. I'm not going to mention names here because we see them on a multiple time, but we will not be inviting them to the show anytime soon. But
Well, you know what?
same thing. You give them an opportunity, and they're just like,
It's interesting.
Go ahead, I'm sorry, Robert.
The Bigfoot people are their own breed. A lot of the times, these Bigfoot researchers are backwoodsmen, and I don't know what other term to use. And I don't mean that in a pejorative way. They're living on their own land and they're, kind of away from the city and stuff like that. And they're kind of ornery folk, you know, and they have
Well,
their ideas and they're pretty forceful people a lot of the times,
yeah.
and if you own 40 acres in the woods and you see Bigfoot or whatever, that's your property and that's your realm and your own thoughts about it or whatever. And you're not going to budge on what you think, and you're going to be stubborn and you're going to, you know, 86
Well,
anybody out of there who you think disagrees with you. I've seen that a lot with Bigfoot researchers, sad to say, but
I want to give props to Steve Coles, who was phenomenal. Yeah, a phenomenal guy. He's a real big name in Bigfoot lore, if you will. Very
Well, a Bigfoot researcher,
yes,
but he's
very
one
much a
that comes
researcher.
at it from an analytical standpoint,
Yes.
kind of the opposite of the ones. And Robert's right. There's many of those out there.
Yeah.
Steve Coles, on the other hand, is the opposite, and that's why he's so highly thought of in the field, is because people trust what he has to say because he does look at it very analytically.
Yep. So, a couple more questions for you, Robert. I know it's probably getting close to bedtime. At least it is for Jerry. He's old. What do you think? One of the things, let me digress just for a second. One of the things I thought was amazing was when I was touring South America and they were telling us about how all the Mayans had a birthmark inside inside their lip. Have a blue dot or a dot of some sort inside that just happens. That's how you can tell that they're actual Mayans. They have a birthmark on the inside of I think it's inside their lip. If I'm wrong, tell me about that. But it was pretty amazing.
I've never heard that before. You're the first person I'm
Really?
hearing that for. And you know what? That doesn't mean that it's not true or whatever. It just means that I've never heard of it before. Like I said, I'm not a big
Oh,
know-it-all. I don't have all the answers and I don't know everything. So now in a case like this, you've given me a little piece of information that I'll go and I'll look up, later and ask people and talk to people about. But I've never heard that before. So thanks for enlightening
well,
me and giving
yeah.
me something
I
to
was
look
just
into.
curious. I was just curious as to what you think happened to the Mayan civilization, because they had this sprawling civilization, huge cities, roads that rivaled anything the Romans were doing as far as architectural wise. And LIDAR is showing all of South America was, most of the forest was even, they think, a construction of the Mayan civilization because of the soil that strong and as mighty as they are, for them just to go away. What happened? What do you think?
Well, there are a lot of different theories as to that. And what I was pursuing a PhD in archaeology for a brief period of time. And one of the conclusions I came to in one of the seminars I was in, and I thought would be a good paper, a very interesting article, was how our contemporary images of doomsday are reflected in the theories of the Maya collapse. Like in the 70s, they were saying that it was warfare, the height of the Cold War, for
Right.
us. We had war on our mind, little skirmishes, all of this stuff. And then it slowly changed to environmental degradation. And that was a big topic, cutting down the forests and stuff like that. That was a big topic in, the 80s into the 90s. And then people were saying, oh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe it was a pathogen. Now, where'd that come from, right? The global pandemic. So a lot of theories
Right.
that come out about the Maya reflect our own idea of the end of times or whatever. So it's very hard to really get a grasp on why the civilization collapsed. It probably just got too big to sustain itself, I think, in the environment that it was in. The population grew, there was not enough arable land, that led to social strife. And then all around the Maya area, around 800, 850 AD, things started to go south. And then people just started abandoning the cities, kind of like what I did last year, right? San Diego was not
Right?
looking pretty for me anymore. Where did I move? I moved to western Nebraska, this small town. So maybe the dynamic is there. What happened back there? Or am I doing what I'm accusing these researchers of doing? Projecting my own current situation back in time. See, I just caught myself doing that. I've never thought of that before. So they could have abandoned the cities like
Oh,
I
wow.
did because they were too unlivable and moved just out into the country. And that could have happened. And once that happens, once people leave a city and abandon it, then the government collapses. They can't control things. There's anarchy, whatever, and not in the political sense. I mean, just in the word anarchy, chaos. Okay. And so
The
maybe that's what
biggest
happened. So social
the biggest
tensions
example of
based on
that,
resources. What? I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, the biggest example of that in the United States that we can look at currently and see that would be Detroit,
Yeah.
where Detroit was literally giving away hundreds of thousands of acres of abandoned homes to reduce the city imprint so they didn't have to provide services out to those areas anymore as part of their rebuild and their upgrade. You could buy whole blocks of old Detroit for a few dollars, few $100. You could buy literally a block of houses, but you had to pay to have those taken care of. So
Yeah.
I looked it
So
up just to make sure I was right. A Mayan birthmark can refer to a physical congenital birthmark common in most populations in the Mayan community. If a person is an actual descendant of the Mayan civilization, or other, and it says, or other indigenous Central American babies could be born with what's called Mongolian spots, also called congenital German melanosis. They are blue-gray spots or blue-black birthmarks that appear on the lower back, buttocks, or shoulders, and they usually fade to just being able to see them by the ages of 3 to 5. There you go.
wow, so I learned something about my own topic today. So that's great. I mean, I appreciate that. I always like to learn more. So, yeah, thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've talked about Egypt. We've talked about Central America and Mexico. We've talked about Mars. Is there anything we haven't talked about that you want to discuss tonight, Mr. Robert?
Yes, the big news that the government of Egypt is going to announce that most people don't know about.
Yes.
And we were told this by Dr. Zahi Hawass, so I heard it from the horse's mouth. King Tut, for many, many years, many decades, they believed that he was poisoned, and that's how he died, the boy king. And they have examined the mummy thoroughly using new techniques, and the Egyptian government is going to announce sometime late May or early June the real cause of death of King Tut. And I'm going to reveal it to you here on this show. So you're getting a scoop here.
Ooh.
And so King Tut died from an infection to his left leg by his knee. He was in a hunting accident, and his wound became infected, and he died within a week. So that's his real cause of death. He wasn't poisoned. It wasn't palace intrigue or anything like that. It was a simple accident while he was hunting because he liked to hunt.
He died like King Robert in Game of Thrones. A hunting accident. Dang it.
Yeah, so that was his cause
Wow.
of death, and they're going to reveal that in the next few weeks. So you heard it here first to your
I
audience.
love it.
Very interesting.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Robert, we certainly appreciate having you back on the show. You are a absolute treasure, and we love having you here. So
Absolutely.
you're
It's
always,
always
welcome to come
fun.
back.
Yeah, it's always a good
again-
time. So yeah, anytime you want.
If
me
you
back, I
don't,
can
if
come
you
on.
haven't watched Mexico Unexplained on YouTube, check it out. Mexico Unexplained. Robert does shows. How often are your shows posted on Mexico Unexplained?
Every week, and I have 455 long length shows, and then short length reels, and clips. I have about 1,000 of them. So there's a lot of material to
Wow.
go through. Yeah. And if you don't like listening
That's
or
amazing.
watching videos, you can go to my website, MexicoUnexplained.com, and read. And at the bottom of each blog post or article, I have references. So if you want to dig deeper, you can dig deeper. And there's no paywall there. Everything's for free. So you can read to your heart's content.
Very
That's
nice.
amazing. And that's one of the reasons Jerry appreciates having you on, because Jerry is always the skeptic and wants people to bring receipts, and you do that on every show. That's awesome.
I try my best.
I want to take I just want to take a quick second. We haven't mentioned it the entire show, but you are on our anniversary show. As of yesterday, Newsworthy with Steve and Jerry has been live every week for the last 4 years
Nice.
in
Congratulations.
some form or fashion.
We had our 4th year anniversary. Well, thank you. Thank you.
And we have been doing this a long time. And like you, we have almost 300 shows, 362
Well,
shows.
not like him. He's got over
no,
1,000.
yeah,
but-
no. But
Yeah, we've got some substantial material. Yeah, and we couldn't have had a better guest on to celebrate the
No.
4th anniversary.
I am so when you mentioned coming back on the show, I got giddy. You can ask Jerry. I was like, "Oh, Rob, coming back!" I love talking to people that are smarter than me because I learn. I don't think you can learn by talking to people, that aren't.
And I can say that I've learned more, in my opinion, from listening to Robert than any other guest we've ever had.
Oh, wow. That's high
Very
praise.
knowledgeable.
Thank you very much.
So we appreciate you coming. If you'll hang out with us for just a second, we're going to wrap this all up. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Don't
Thanks
go
for
anywhere.
having me. Yeah.
We have a great bonus story coming up right after these short ads. And while you're waiting, swing by Newsworthy with StephenJerry.com for updates, past episodes, and all the weird stuff that Jerry's into.
Before those ads roll, make sure you like, follow, and share the show, especially with your weirdest friend. You know who I'm talking about. And hey, if you're thinking about buying a home, refinancing, or just want straight answers, talk to Ed Locke at USA Mortgage. Local, trusted, and ready to walk you through every step. Call 502-680-0953.
And of course, we recommend Smoking Gun Jerky out of Lincoln, Nebraska. Use code CRYPTID10 for an amazing discount on some of the best jerky you will ever taste.
Man, I tell you, I got this bonus story just for you, Robert. Don't go anywhere. I hope that you enjoy it. Well, what are we doing here? Let me get my computer right. In 1995, a bus driver named Rafael Martinez was finishing his last route of the night outside of San Miguel, El Salvador. This stretch of road was known for two things: sugarcane fields that swallowed sound and sightings of El Cajito. I'm hoping I say that right. The supernatural dog said to follow travelers at night. Rafael
Cadejo.
didn't believe any of it. Cadejo, thank you.
Yeah, I
Around
did a show
11:30
on this.
p.m. he parked. Oh, I'm so excited. Around 11:30 p.m., he parked the empty bus at the turnaround point and stepped outside to stretch. The night was still. No wind, no insects, just the distant rustle of sugarcane. As he lit a cigarette, he heard footsteps behind him on the gravel. Heavy, slow, too deliberate to be an animal. He turned, expecting a late passenger. Instead, he saw a massive black dog standing at the edge of the headlights. Its fur looked like smoke, its eyes bright enough to reflect without light. It didn't growl. It didn't move. It just stared at him. Raphael shouted and threw a rock. The rock passed right through the dog. That's when the smell hit him. Sulfur and wet earth, like something had crawled out of the very bowels of the ground. The dog stepped forward, and Raphael said the temperature dropped so sharply he could see his breath. He scrambled back onto the bus, slammed the door, and locked it, and the dog walked right up to the front bumper and sat. Not attacking, not leaving, just watching. When Raphael finally started the engine, the dog vanished. Not ran, vanished, like a shadow pulled backwards. He drove the bus straight down to the depot and refused to ever take the night route again. Other drivers later admitted they'd seen the same dog in the same place, always silent, always watching. Locals say the black Cadejo appears to men who are living out of balance, drinking too much, working too hard, carrying a heavy guilt. It doesn't attack, it just follows. A reminder that something in your life needs correcting. Raphael quit drinking a month later. He swore the Cadejo wasn't there to hurt him. It was there to warn him.
Human trafficking happens in every community in the world. If you see something, say something.
Call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888.
And Jerry, if you can't see the light,
Be the light.